Listen, son, to all the sons out there. You can be anything you want to be. Keep God first and love yourself, love your family, and chase your dreams. Welcome to the Listen Son podcast.
Welcome to the Listen Son podcast with my dad, Mike Bond Sr. Nice to see you, Pop.
How you doing? Yep.
And I'm Michael Bond Jr., of course. Welcome everybody for tuning in with us. We got Mr. Jordan Reed with us this evening. Jordan is a guy that I've been watching. He don't even know from afar on Twitter and just the things that he has been doing in his draft analysis and, how he's been, rating guys and things like that. If I wasn't a coach, he makes me want to be a draft analyst. I'm just throwing that out there because he does such a good job with his reports and things like that. He stepped out and he said he'd join us today because we got a lot of young men that need to hear from guys like Jordan just to keep their heads up and know that, they still are going down a path that can work. And it's just not about going to the league and things like that. It's finishing school and making a difference the best way you can. So without further ado, I want to start, Jordan, and ask you, man, what has been your introduction to sports? Did you have a father figure involved or, what role did that play?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you guys, of course, for just allowing me to be on the podcast. It's always a pleasure to just come on and just share my life experiences. Is not only, I think, one of the few, Black guys in the draft sphere as well, but just sharing my experiences as a whole. I think that's something that I always enjoy doing, especially in a relaxed environment like this. I don't get a lot of opportunities to, just let my hair down and just talk not only football, but just some of the things that we're having to go through. Some of the challenges that we're having to face as well. But I did have a father figure in my life. My dad has been in my life throughout my entire life. He's somebody that I look up to. He's a person that I can compare myself to as well. He was a college athlete himself. He played basketball at Morgan State. So he has an HBCU background like myself. I played quarterback at North Carolina Central, different sport, but just keeping it in the family as far as from an HBCU aspect, that's something that I always wanted to do. But my journey has definitely been unique as far as I never thought that I would be like in the draft sphere. I was always a basketball guy growing up just because, of course, my dad he was a big advocate of basketball. That's something that he always tried to instill in me, but he never forced me to play any other sport. I kind of really just gravitated towards football, but he says that, but he kind of forced me to sign up just because he thought I was a little bit soft, so he put me on the football field to toughen me up a little bit. But little did I know that I was playing catch with the head coach of the team, and like I just slung the ball 30 yards down the field, and he was like, "Oh man, do that again." So I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." I was just sitting there playing catch with him, just tossing like 25, 30 yards down the field. He was like, "Okay, son, you're gonna be a quarterback from here on out." So I was like, "Okay." So that's kind of like how my journey got started as a quarterback. I've never played any other position as long as I've been playing football. So, after that, I went into coaching after my career at North Carolina Central. I didn't have any pro aspirations or anything like that. Just got tired of taking those hits, man. I want to be able to walk by the time I was 30. So I didn't have any pro aspirations. So I went right into coaching. After that, I was a graduate assistant for 2 years at Central. And then I was fortunate enough to get a full-time position there as well. Stayed there until 2018, coaching quarterbacks and also running backs. Was fortunate enough to win 3 conference championships. We won 3 MEAC titles when I was there. So some of the best years of my life. Credit to Jerry Mack, a guy that I look up to. He was the head coach at the time.
He's down in Texas now.
Yeah,
he was
at Rice.
Yep.
Yeah, he was at Rice, and he just got the job at Tennessee as the running back.
Oh, sorry,
coach.
Tennessee. Tennessee.
Yeah, he's played a huge part in my life. He was somebody that gave me a chance in coaching. After that, we got let go in 2018. We had an interim. They didn't bring him back, unfortunately. So that was one of the most trying times in my life. I didn't really know what was going to happen at that time, but the crazy thing about it is it was a blessing in disguise for me, just because I was able to go back to my original background of journalism and then also sports as well. So journalism is something that I've always wanted to get into, but I just never could, just because I was always so involved in sports. I could never really get involved as much as I wanted to, as far as from an off the playing field perspective. But I kind of was able to sit back and just take everything in at the time. I didn't really know what my next steps were going to be after that. And life is crazy, man. You get dealt so many curveballs. My wife actually got pregnant with twins at the time as well. So here I am, just got fired from my job at Central with twins
Wow.
on the way. So, you got to adjust. That's how life is. But
That's right.
the
That's
great
right.
thing, the great thing about it is, God's never going to put you in things that you can't handle. And, I prayed
Yeah.
about it. I thought about it, and I just wanted to press forward. So I freelanced a little bit. Luckily enough, I saved my money. I was smart with my money at the time, and I was able to freelance write a little bit. And I started a Twitter account, which you've seen now has blown up a whole bunch. I never thought it would blow up the way it did, but I was fortunate enough to get a job with a company called the Draft Network, and life has been changing since that. So that was like a life changing experience for me. But that's just a little bit about my background.
What were you writing about? Like, what were some of the things when you were, just trying to get, that journalism career started? What were just some of the articles you would write about?
So I always kept a blog, even when I was playing, just because I loved sports. Like I was that kid that sat in front of the TV all day long, and my parents would have to tell me, like, "Man, just go outside and play. Get out from in front of that TV." I knew every person's name, every player's name in the NBA, the NFL, and whenever a transaction happened, I already knew about it. So back during that time, it wasn't. It was prior to like notifications popping up on your phone, and at the bottom ticker, it would just pop up on ESPN, and that was our way of getting news. But I
Okay.
was always the first person to see the news, and I was telling people about it. And it was like, man, how did you know that already? Like I haven't even seen it pop up on ESPN. So I've always been a huge sports lover. And whenever something happened, I would immediately go and write about it in my blog. So as I'm collecting all these blog posts, like I have hundreds of posts. It was a website back then called blogger.com. I'm not even sure if that's still up and running now, but my old account there, I had like hundreds of blog posts just about my personal feelings about it, the positives and negatives of it. But then I got to a point of where I was comfortable enough to where I could share my work. And I started to share my work on social media, and people started to see it. And then I kind of gravitated towards an NFL draft perspective. And I forgot to mention something. So my last 2 years when I was at Central, I was a recruiting coordinator. So that's really where I developed my love for scouting and just learning the
Mm,
background stories of kids
yep.
sitting in living rooms, figuring out who the mouthpiece is. Do you have to win over mom? Do you have to win over dad in order to get these kids to come to North Carolina Central? So I was like, man, I really enjoy figuring out these different types of puzzle pieces and then seeing them all come together to form a championship type team. So that's really where I developed my love for scouting. When I was a recruiting coordinator, I just loved the process of driving all over the country, sitting in living rooms, convincing kids to why they should attend a HBCU like North Carolina Central. And it worked out for us. We won 3 championships, and that's really where I really developed my love for scouting. But I wanted to figure out how I could combine my scouting background and then my journalism background. And that's really where my love for the NFL draft came from.
Mr. Jordan Reed, welcome to the Listen Son podcast. Glad you took your time out to join us today. Your transition from player to coach and then to analyst, what has that transition been like?
It's really been interesting just because I wish I knew half the stuff that I did now as I did as a player. You learn so much just seeing the game from a different lens, and you learn so many different things. And I think the hardest transition for me as a graduate assistant was going from a player to coach is that some of these players that I was coaching during my very first years, I was playing with them. So getting them to not see me as Jordan, the teammate, and now Jordan is the coach, I think that was one of the biggest transitions for me. There was just so many different things that I couldn't do anymore with them. Like I couldn't go out with them anymore. I just couldn't hang out with them anymore just because I wanted to be seen as a coach now, as opposed to that guy that was their teammate now. So that helped me mature a whole bunch. And, it was a little bit weird early on just because, your boys are always going to be your boys. You guys have played team sports before and you still have
Right,
bonds with those guys to this day. But so that
right.
was a bit of a different transition for me, but it helped me mature so much. But then as far as an analyst, I think once again, it's just adding that versatility to myself and just seeing different things from a different lens once again.
So if you had to say you learned something from the transition, what would that be?
I think just the mature aspect of it and just you see so many different things, not only as you mature as a man and then you mature as an individual as well off the field and on the field, just seeing now that you're responsible for so many different kids that are in your room. So when I was a graduate assistant, my first year, I was with the quarterbacks. So now just trying to understand the game from a coach perspective and teaching it now, as opposed to just learning the game from a player's perspective. I think that was a big adjustment for me, just because you have to understand that you're essentially like their parent. Now they drop you off, your parents drop you off at college, and you're depending on those coaches to do pretty much everything for them, just because there's not a lot of structure for those guys early on. They don't really know. You're used to your parents waking you up or getting on the bus or go to school in high school, however it was that you did. But now all those kids are pretty much on their own, and you really have to point them in the right direction. You have to show them like where the cafeteria is, where the weight room is, where the locker room is. So many things that you have to go through. You get so much hands-on experience with that, so it helps you mature a lot. And I think it helped me as a dad now as well.
Jordan, do you have any desire to get back into coaching?
I don't. I actually enjoy the aspect of not really having to worry about wins and losses in college coaching. You guys know there's just no job security in it at all. You can be in a comfortable situation one week and then fired the next week. So that's just the rough part about college coaching overall. But just sitting back and being able to watch the game and talk about the game and not having to worry about wins and losses or the outcome of a season, I really enjoy that.
If young men wanting to be an analyst, what should they know? Or what advice can you give them?
The biggest thing that I would say is just put yourself out there, just because I will say it's such a disadvantage for us as far as just like African-American men. And I say this to a lot of people that for whatever reason, it's just like a culture shock when they see that we can talk well. Whenever they see that you can talk well, it's like, man, maybe I can learn something from this guy. And I commentated my very first game in January. I did the Tropical Bowl down in Florida. And it was my first time ever being on air. I had never had any on-air experience at all. And I got so many text messages after that game, like, man, you sound like a natural. I would have never guessed that this was your first time ever being on air. So I think just being able to develop those talking skills, being able to talk well, and if you do your homework, I think you'll be just fine. So just understanding how to talk to people, communication skills, and just understanding how to deliver messages to audiences. That would be my biggest advice for being an analyst. And don't be scared to put yourself out there. You're seeing people make tons of money off of YouTube. Just start a YouTube channel and just talk about the game. You can just pull up clips of the game. You can go through it and just start a podcast. Like I randomly started a podcast a couple of years ago, and that really helped me like deliver a message to a lot of people. And before you know it, I mean, the podcast is going 30 plus minutes. So that's a couple of things that I would say.
What's the name of the podcast?
The Read Option Podcast.
Okay. Got shout out the Read Option Podcast.
Read it. Yeah.
Nice play on words.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Jordan, Mr. Jordan, you say you had twins. What you have, girls or boys?
2 girls. So I'm outnumbered in my household 3-1.
Okay. Yeah. How was that, man, becoming a dad?
You know this, you're never ready. Whether it's marriage or a parent, you're just never ready for those moments, and you just take it as it goes. But it's been a really interesting journey, just seeing them grow up. And it's kind of like, man, I created and brought this person into the world. And it's just really cool seeing them grow up, understanding now, like they're about to be 2 in May, and just seeing them, they're saying words now, trying to put sentences together. They're understanding what their hands are and what they do, what their feet are, what their toes are, just seeing them understanding all that stuff day by day has been a joy.
So what you've been coming up in sports, would you kind of let them feel that out for themselves, or would you lead them that way, or what?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be that parent that never forced them to do anything. So if they wanted to, be a cheerleader, or be a basketball player, be a football player, whatever you want to be, I'm not going to force them to do anything. I want them to be, or to gravitate towards whatever it is that they want to do. I never want to be like a helicopter parent in a sense, and just having total control over them, just because just seeing what's happening, not just with young ladies, but with young men, is that you're getting parents that are specializing in one sport. And something that I always tell parents is that just allow them to play a bunch of sports, allow them to be multi-sport athletes, just because there's so many different hidden messages in each sport that you're playing. You're going to be playing with different teammates. There's going to be different body functions that you learn. And sometimes you never know, you may get a scholarship opportunity in another sport that you didn't even plan on trying prior to that. So I would say just try it. Don't be scared to try anything.
Pivotal. Sorry to cut you off, but we got a big matchup in tennis right now. As soon as we wrap up, I'm going to watch Serena and
absolutely.
What's my other girl name? Yeah,
Osaka.
Osaka. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking forward to it.
Yes, I am too. Go ahead, Dad. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. A lot of young men that has been on the Listen Son podcast, well, not a lot of them, but a few of them have mentioned if they had to do their recruiting over, they would do it over again. What do you feel about that? Your recruiting experience?
Well, I actually enjoyed my recruiting experience. So I didn't get to play my senior year of high school. I only played 2 games my senior year because I tore my meniscus during the second game. So the only 3 offers that I'd had coming out of high school was Winston-Salem State, North Carolina Central, and Western Carolina. And I actually went to Winston-Salem State my first semester, and some things unfortunately happened for me there, or didn't unfortunately happen for me there. There was a coaching change, and then they just kind of wanted some new personnel in there. So I kept relationships and I kept contacts with the coaches at North Carolina Central. They knew plenty about me just because they recruited me. So I ended up transferring there, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. So I wouldn't change anything about my recruitment. I enjoyed my first semester at Winston. I learned a lot of things there. There was a lot of eye-opening experiences there. And then when I transferred to Central, I mean, the college life was, it was the college life. You guys know exactly what entails with that. So I really enjoyed my recruitment and everything that came with it.
A couple more questions for me, Mr. Jordan Reed. We spend a lot of times talking about how player develop their skills during this pandemic. How can we, what suggestions will you give families and communities to help the young men during this time?
It's really tough just because it's really hard to go anywhere. You're so kind of cautious about what you can do, what you can't do. You don't want to expose anybody to anything. And I think there's really no right way to do anything right now, honestly, just because of how cautious you have to be about everything. But I will say, don't be scared to put yourself out there. Send emails, send your highlight tapes out to everybody. Send them messages, leave them voicemails, just because college coaches get tons of messages. I've been there, I've been in the shoes before. We get tons of messages each day. So you have to figure out a different way of how you're going to stand out from the pack. You can send a personal video with your face in it, as opposed to just a highlight video talking about some of the things that you have accomplished off the field, whether that's in clubs that you're in or some of the community service things that you have done. So you just have to figure out a way you can stand out from the pack. That would be my biggest advice to anybody, but just don't be scared to put yourself out there. But I think a common thing that we're seeing with young kids now is that they end up name chasing. And what I mean by name chasing is that they only send their stuff to Clemson and Alabama or ACC schools or SEC, that they forget about these lower level FCS schools, Division II, Division III, and a scholarship is a scholarship at the end of the day. And what I tell every kid that is kind of underwhelmed if they go to a Division II or Division III, or their recruitment didn't go the way that they didn't want it to go, is that you are what you make of your experience. And if you're good enough, scouts are going to find you no matter what, no matter where you are. If you're at a Division II school or a big time FBS school, scouts are going to do their homework on you, and they're eventually going to find you. And that was a big eye-opening experience to me when I went to North Carolina Central, just because I played against some really great players, and I coached against some even better players like Tariq Cohen that plays for the Chicago Bears, Darius Leonard from the Indianapolis Colts, Javon Hargrave from the Philadelphia Eagles. These are guys that I played against and also coached against as well. And these guys were second, third, or even fourth round draft picks at these small HBCUs. And none of those guys were highly recruited out of high school, but they made the most of their experience when they got there.
Right.
That's some good names you just said too.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I guess it's my turn. Hop back in here, and this is pretty much getting to the tail end of things. But I just watched Why Not Us, and I'm pretty sure you fellas have too. But Chris Paul directing your alma mater, Coach Moten, and the basketball team at North Carolina Central. And it was a clip going around where he was speaking on, when you go to HBCU, you're just not getting the education and things like that. You're getting so much more. And and you just kind of said it, some of the guys don't even consider sending letters or recruiting tape to them schools. So how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you've gotten so much more than just the degree and education component from the HBCU that you went to?
Yeah, for sure. I'll speak on Coach Moten, and I call him CP, Chris Paul. Coach Moten is somebody that I've had a great relationship with since I got to Central in 2010. He's the ultimate role model to me, a player that's also an alum of Central. He's built the program from the ground up, and the basketball program was.
He's an awesome storyteller too. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he's like the Coach K of Central. Like he's gonna be there for 30 more years probably. He's never gonna go anywhere. But CP is somebody that's close to me as well. I don't openly say this a lot, but he's actually my god brother. My dad and his dad, they grew up together in Winston-Salem together. They went to high school together. So CP is somebody that's near and dear to me. One of the best role models that I've ever had in my life. And I knew about the project about a year ago when it was happening, but of course I couldn't say anything about it. I didn't want to ruin it, but I really enjoyed the first episode. And I think Coach Moten hit so many things. I think he hit the nail on the head as far as the bond that you're able to develop at a HBCU, just because what I tell a lot of people is that at HBCUs, the campus probably never exceeds, as far as the enrollment, over 10,000 people. So it's kind of like a big high school. That's what I like to compare it to. You're seeing a lot of the normal people that you see every day. You're seeing a lot of the similar faces day in and day out. So you're able to develop a bond, not only with the people that you're playing with, but also the people that are outside of the team as well. And what you're starting to notice is that you're creating a tight-knit community. So whenever you have these student sections at these games, you're creating a great environment. It was always a great environment at basketball and football games. And then you're looking up in the stands and you're like, hey man, I appreciate y'all, but you already have a tight-knit bond off of the field as well, just because you're starting to see them every day. And then at these bigger schools, even though the stadiums are bigger and of course the crowd noises are going to be better, but it's just not that same type of bond. And you kind of just go about your different ways whenever you get away from campus. But the brotherhood and just the tight-knit community is just so much different from Central, just because you're seeing so many of the same people every single day. And in classes, you're not just a number. Those classes at big schools, I mean, there's 100 plus people in those classes. At Central, I never had any classes over 20 plus people. So you're being able to once again create that tight-knit bond, not only with your teammates, but also those regular students as well. So I just think the bond is so much different at HBCUs. And that's why I think the environment of games are always like that as well.
Yeah. And you can tell it goes beyond playing experience because, like you said, you and Coach Moten have a good relationship. Like you said, CP3, y'all got a good relationship. And even some of the other coaches, I know Coach Simmons, I think, he's big down at FAMU and stuff like that. So, I agree with you, man. Was it ever a doubt in your mind that you weren't going to go to a HBCU or
so
did you have other schools on your list?
No, I wanted to go to a HBCU just because like my dad went to a HBCU. So I knew about the HBCU culture. I grew up in the HBCU culture. North Carolina A&T, North Carolina Central, that was always a huge rivalry down here. Winston-Salem State as well, back when they were playing each other. They all were in the MEAC back then. So it was always a great rivalry just going to those games, man. I was so amazed. As a little kid, 20,000 people looks like 100,000 people to you. You're seeing these bands play back and forth. You're seeing all these other individuals going back and forth with each other as well. You're seeing all the fashionable things about the game as well. So I just always love the atmosphere of the HBCU. And then you're seeing us, for lack of better terms, if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
Surrounding everybody as well. So just the culture, the environment, I always wanted to go to a HBCU.
I feel like I'm not going to say cheated, but because it's not a lot in the North. I don't know if it really, it's, I think that's something that especially if you're in the northern part of the country, that should be an annual father-son trip at least,
for sure.
or bi-yearly, biannually is to go down and visit some of those campuses. Cause I don't know none of the traditions or, none of that stuff. I just got to hear about it, but yeah, it sounds very rich and like a great life lesson and life experience that you wouldn't trade for anything from everybody I hear from. So
for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Jordan Reed,
yeah, that's I tried to figure it out, man, because that's where I wanted my son to go. And I had people talking to him, and he was getting recruited. But when I thought about it, sat back and thought about hindsight, that's what I should have did.
Mhm.
Personally, took him on a trip, let him eyewitness this, see it
Mhm.
for himself, because I was high on it, but he didn't see it. He didn't see the vision that I seen.
Mhm.
So quite naturally, that's and when I look back at that, I know that's what I should have done. Mhm.
I mean,
We
Not
we we
not
got to
not
get we
not
got to
saying
get.
not saying not to cut you off, Jordan, but not saying that still would have sealed the deal, but at
Mhm.
least let him see it.
yeah,
Hmm.
For sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
I got to get you down to a Central football game whenever COVID slows
please,
down a little
yes,
bit,
please
man.
do.
See the
Hmm.
atmosphere, and as soon as you walk in, smelling the fish plates and chicken plates and all that stuff. So,
Right, right,
You know,
right.
it's tough going. It's tough going to a place you don't see.
yeah.
But to my dad's credit, he did sign me up for a program where they took us to Tennessee, and they took us to Meharry, they took us to Fisk, I think TSU. Of course, we seen
Mhm.
UT.
Right.
But it wasn't enough of that. I did it that once, and then it was like, okay, I did it. But had I kept doing that every summer, that probably would have made a huge impact. No doubt. So um I want people to hit home, about the profession of analysts. Who are the top analysts right now? And you know, are you, because I immediately thought you were trying to stay on the draft side of like analyzing the upcoming drafts and things like that, but
Mhm.
I didn't even realize you can broadcast games. So what is the
Yeah.
profession in its entirety doing? Who are the pioneers right now?
I mean, the top one is Stephen A. Smith. I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time on him.
Yeah.
His story is just remarkable. His journey actually started in North Carolina. He worked at a small newspaper in Trinity, North Carolina, which is about an hour away from me. But he's a person that's really earned everything that he's got so far, just because he literally started at the bottom. And he'll tell you this all the time. And like, I survived off of drinking Kool-Aid and eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches my first job. And he will tell you that straight up. And I think that was like 25 years ago or so. And he worked his way up. He eventually got to the Philadelphia Inquirer, I believe is what it's called. And he covered Allen Iverson. And that's really where he started to blow up. And then he went to ESPN, and it was all she wrote
Yeah.
after that. So he's definitely one of the biggest pioneers that I always like to look up to. So he definitely is the biggest one that I love to mention.
Yeah, sorry, I had you in the box there. I was thinking more of the career path of McShay and
Yeah,
what's the other
yeah.
guy? When you see
Mel
at the
Kiper.
bottom, Mel Kiper, top 10 picks
Yeah,
left. I was thinking
yeah,
more of that, but I see you well rounded. You can do it all, man. That's good. That's good to hear. Very excellent.
absolutely. Versatility is key, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So to wrap it up, man, the way we wrap up the show all the time, I didn't tell you this, and I usually don't because I like the message to be genuine. My dad, the reason of the title, my dad always gave me some message. When it was time to tell me something, he'd sit me down. It always went something like, listen, son, with whatever he was about to say. And I know that he meant business when he did that. So to wrap up the show, I want you to give a listen, son message to the viewers if you can, please. Your sons that guys that you
Hmm.
mentor or whatever.
Well, something I will say is that this is a quote that my dad said to me a million times, is that you get out of it what you put into it. And that really embodies hard work to me. And I've really grown accustomed to that quote over time, just because, I mean, we're in the same type of generation. We weren't quite the microwave society that these kids are today, but we really wanted things right then and there. We really didn't understand what hard work eventually led to. But, being a 3-year starter as a quarterback, then being a coach as a graduate assistant, then earning full-time status as a coach, and then being in the draft sphere now in the position that I'm in, a lot of that is accredited to hard work. There's been a lot of sleepless nights that I've had to go through, just doing homework, doing background with all these guys, just figuring out everything that I need to know, just because I've always wanted to be knowledgeable about every single guy in the draft process. And, there's tens of thousands of guys that enter the draft process every year, but I felt that I could separate myself by not only being knowledgeable about the guys that go to Alabama and Clemson, but if there's a small school guy at North Carolina Central, like there was at the Senior Bowl this year, I want to know everything about Brian Mills. That was his name, just because what happens a lot of times is that, yeah, these guys are knowledgeable about these guys that are coming out of Alabama and Clemson, but what about this guy over here at North Carolina Central that's probably going to end up being a 5th or 6th round pick that you have never heard of before? But I know everything that I need to know about him. And so I always wanted to be knowledgeable about those guys, but it takes a bunch of hard work and you get out of it what you put into it. So I always wanted to know not only, so with me, it's twofold for me. I always wanted to know guys, not only with their helmets on, but also their helmets off as well. And that's really where my love for scouting came into the equation. Like I said, when I was a recruiting coordinator, I can go on Huddle or YouTube and see who this guy is as a player. Anybody can do that. I mean, we could sit together and figure out the strengths and weaknesses of a guy when we're watching a highlight tape. But I want to figure out who you are as a person. Is there an interesting background story that you can tell me of why you got interested in the game? Do you actually love the game? And just things of that nature. I've always gotten joys out of figuring out stuff like that. So the biggest thing that I would say is you get out of it what you put into it, and then don't get discouraged if nobody is noticing your work or what you're doing, just because your promotion or somebody noticing you, it comes when you least expect it.
I like that, man. What a beautiful way to wrap it up. Get to know. I'm pretty sure Jordan is going to be open to any questions that come to our email for the podcast. And man, I'm just a big fan, man. I'm tremendously excited for the work and what you're going to be doing. I know you have gained a new fan in my father, and we just appreciate the time you took to be with us this evening.
No problem. Like I said, thank y'all for the invitation. And if you ever need me back, just let me know. I'm always willing.
Yes, sir.
Thanks once again, my fraternity and sorority of listeners of Listen Son podcast. Please, women and men, please like, subscribe, and share. Continue to support our goals to connect untold special real life stories.